Let's examine the experiment that changed everything. Imagine, you are sitting in a dark room. Scientists have connected your brain to a monitor. They are tracking every spark of your neural activity in real time. On the screen, the computer displays a random series of images: violent war zones, peaceful lakes, raw intimacy. Standard biology says cause and effect. The image appears, then your brain reacts. Simple, logical. Or so we thought. Because when Dr. Solomon's team zoomed in on the timeline to the millisecond, they couldn't find the logic. They found an error.
The data was impossible. The subjects' brains were reacting before the image appeared. To be more precise, 400 milliseconds earlier. Before your eyes saw the violence, your brain was already horrified. Before you saw the lake, you had already calmed down. Your brain doesn't predict the future, it senses it. But here's what will keep you awake at night. The computer selects these images using a random number generator. The machine makes its decision in the last second. Still, the brain reacts beforehand. This means your mind isn't just faster than the screen. It might also be affecting the code itself. We're not just observing reality. We're probably creating it. Yes, today on my Daily Books channel, we'll be summarizing and exploring Dan Brown's much-loved, eagerly read book, The Secret of Secrets, with visuals.
In Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, there's a moment of disconcerting wonder where a quote is revealed. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in a single decade than it has in all the previous centuries combined. For Dr. Brigitte Gestner, this progress was about to turn into a horrific end as she floated above Prague's snow-covered towers. The neuroscientist felt herself gliding weightlessly and formlessly above the illuminated towers of St. Vitus Cathedral and the winding streets. She was a neuroscientist. There was one truth she had learned while studying the human brain at medical school. Everything that made us human was nothing more than chemical compounds suspended in the electrical charges of our brains. Death meant the cutting off of this power source and the transformation of the chemicals into a meaningless pool of fluid. Death is no end, she would say. Yet now, her consciousness was fully awake, gliding over the gardens of Wallenstein Palace, watching the snowflakes pass through her. This peaceful glide was interrupted by a terrifying memory that flooded her mind. Her body was not in the sky above her now, but deep underground, tightly bound to a machine of her own creation. The creature standing over her resembled a primitive man, as if crawling out of the earth. Its face and skull were cracked like the surface of the moon, covered in a filthy clay. 3 letters were roughly carved on her forehead in an ancient language. The monster had said to her, "I am his guardian," its voice sounding as if it came from the void. As Gestner screamed in agony, the monster activated the machine, unleashing unbearable pain through her veins. The neuroscientist was forced to confess everything about the dreadful underground lair he and his partners had created in the depths of Prague, and all its secrets in order to stop the pain. The monster then spoke its final words and reactivated the machine. "Death is not an end. I have died many times." Far removed from this nightmare, Robert Langdon awoke peacefully to the sound of morning mode music at the Four Seasons Hotel in Prague. He was in the royal suite,
where red, white, and blue tulips from the U.S. Embassy adorned his room. However, Langdon's true focus was not on the tulips, but on the woman beside him, Dr. Katherine Solomon, the brilliant scientist he had known since his Princeton days, whom he had loved platonically, and whose attraction between them was now undeniable. Katherine had given a groundbreaking lecture the previous night in the Vladislav Hall at Prague Castle on Noetic Science, the power of human consciousness. "Your consciousness is not created by your brain," she told the crowd. "In fact, your consciousness isn't even inside your head." Langdon remembered how spellbound the crowd had been by these words. Katherine argued that human thought could influence matter, that the mind not only perceived reality, but also created it. These ideas may seem crazy to you, but Daily Book's followers know that every great scientific revolution was initially called impossible. If topics that push the boundaries of the mind interest you, you can join this journey of discovery by subscribing to our channel. However, Katherine's night had not been as peaceful as Langdon's. She had woken up in the middle of the night from a terrifying nightmare. When Langdon tried to comfort her, she said she had seen a woman in her dream, dressed in black, wearing a crown of thorns on her head and holding a silver spear in her hand. The woman in the dream had hissed at Katherine, "You will die," and then the hotel had been engulfed in a huge explosion. Langdon had reassured her, thinking it was a side effect of the Bohemian absinthe she had drunk. As Langdon left the hotel to go swimming in the morning, he saw police dogs searching the lobby, but the hotel manager dismissed it as just a routine precaution. Langdon ran to the Staroff Swimming Center in the snowfall. While swimming in the pool, his mind was filled with Katherine's theories. We don't see the truths right in front of our eyes because we have blind spots. Langdon was unaware of how ruthlessly the scene he was about to encounter would expose his own blind spots. Returning to the hotel after his swim, he thought himself alone amid the fog and snow on Charles Bridge. But halfway across, he noticed a figure approaching him, a woman in black. On her head was a crown encircled by 6 black spikes that seemed to protrude from her skull. Langdon's blood ran cold. It was a shining crown, just like the one in Katherine's dream. But worse still, the woman held a silver spear in her hand, and as she passed, an unbearable stench hit Langdon's nose, the smell of decay and death. When Robert Langdon's body struck the icy surface of the Vltava River, the only sensation he felt was a knife-like cold. He had thrown himself out of the hotel room window because it was the only way to escape the approaching disaster. When he surfaced, gasping for air, he expected to see the hotel explode, flames rising into the sky. But all he saw were panicked guests under emergency lights and the Four Seasons Hotel still standing tall. There had been no explosion. As his wet clothes dragged him down, Langdon fought hypothermia and tried to swim towards the hotel pier. As the current swept him along, he had only one question in his mind. Why? Why was Katherine's dream so realistic? Why did that woman on Charles Bridge smell of death? When he climbed onto the pier, the hotel manager came to him in horror. Langdon managed to say, shivering, "I thought it was a bomb." But what the manager saw in Langdon's eyes was that Langdon was no longer a respected professor, but a man who had lost his mind. This is precisely the point where we need to pause and reflect. How does the human mind distort reality in moments of fear?
Even a rational scientist like Langdon can leap to his death because of an intuitive warning. As the Daily Books family, we also enjoy examining these psychological fractures between the lines of books. If you too are curious about the depth of stories, not just their surface, you can join this journey of discovery by liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Because Langdon's story continues to walk that fine line between madness and genius, and with your support, we will continue to unravel these mysteries. Langdon, taken to his room in his wet clothes, tried to recover by taking a hot shower. However, when he came out of the bathroom, the person waiting for him was not Katherine. Standing before him was a man in a leather jacket with disheveled hair and a stern gaze, Captain Janeshek. The man was an agent of the Czech National Intelligence Service, UZI, and had already confiscated Langdon's passport. Janeshek was ruthless in his interrogation of Langdon. "Why did you alarm the alarm?" he asked. When Langdon replied, "I thought there was going to be an explosion," Janeshek's response was sarcastic. "So you weren't the one who set the bomb for 0700 hours, were you?" Langdon was stunned. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a smartly dressed man with an American accent entered, Michael Harris. Harris was an attaché at the U.S. Embassy and had come to protect Langdon. However, Captain Janeshek held a very powerful card. Taking a deep drag on his cigarette, the captain revealed the truth that froze Langdon and Harris. "Professor," said Janeshek, "I'm not interested in dreams or intuition, but this morning we really did find a bomb in the hotel basement, and the bomb was set exactly for 7 o'clock. Langdon's blood ran cold. Katherine's dream was not just a nightmare, it was a prophecy come true. The hotel hadn't blown up because Janeshek and his team had defused the bomb at the last moment. But for Janeshek, this wasn't a miracle, it was a confession of guilt. In his view, Langdon and Katherine had concocted a fake heroism story to promote Katherine's upcoming book. Imagine seeing a dream and that dream coming true second by second. Do you think this is possible? Or is Janeshek right? Is this a conspiracy or proof of Noetic Science? Be sure to share your theories in the comments, because we need your perspective to solve this mystery.
While Langdon sweated in the interrogation room in Prague, a far darker force was at work in the labyrinthine streets of the old town. The golem had returned to its home, its sanctuary. Its chamber was a temple of pitch-black darkness, completely isolated from the outside world, its windows covered with heavy curtains. Inside, only ultraviolet lights glowed, giving the surrounding objects an otherworldly sheen. The golem removed the clay mask and heavy costume. He saw himself not as a human, but as the embodiment of an ancient legend. According to legend, Rabbi Lo of Prague had created a monster from mud gathered from the river and given it life by writing the Hebrew word Emet, meaning truth, on its forehead. However, when this guardian slipped out of control, the rabbi erased the first letter from its forehead, turning the word into Met, meaning death. Thus, the golem lived between these two words, truth and death. He risked death for the woman he protected, Katherine Solomon. At this point, I want to ask Daily Books followers, how far would you go to protect someone? The golem chose to become a monster to protect Katherine. On this channel, we bring these stories of sacrifice from between the pages to light. If delving into the depths of literature and mystery excites you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because Golem's story is not over yet. Golem began his ritual, which he called ether. As his mind separated from his body, he thought of Katherine. He was jealous of her closeness with Langdon and did not consider Langdon worthy of her. But now was not the time for sentimentality. Golem descended into the basement of the Black Angel Bar and obtained the information needed to deliver the final blow from an abandoned computer there. The goal was clear: to make the impossible possible and silence the underground laboratory forever. Our story now jumps from the misty streets of Prague to the neon-lit skyscrapers of New York. On the 23rd floor of Random House Publishing, editor Jonas Falkman was experiencing the shock of his life. When he logged into the system to read Katherine's world-shattering book on consciousness, a red error message appeared on his screen. Section not found. This was no simple error. Alex from IT, panicking, told Falkman the truth. The files have been deleted, not just from here, but from the backup servers in Maryland, too. Everything is gone. Someone wanted to stifle the scientific truth Katherine was about to reveal before it even came to light. We live in an age where everything can be erased in the digital world. So what is the one thing that cannot be erased? Paper. Falkman had the only printed copy of the manuscript in his hands. Falkman stuffed the manuscript into a bag and fled the office. His aim was to make a backup copy on an untraceable photocopier. But when he stepped out into the freezing cold of 52nd Street, he realized he was not alone. A black minivan pulled up to the curb. Just as Falkman thought, "This is New York, don't be paranoid," he was knocked to the ground by a hard blow from behind. A bag was placed over his head, and he was thrown into the minivan.
This was a professional operation. The order giver was a man codenamed Finch, sitting in a dark room in London. Finch was authorized to cross any moral boundary to protect the Threshold Project. And the order was unequivocal: execute. Is Katherine's book merely a scientific study, or a dangerous weapon that certain powers do not want to see emerge? If you're curious about the answer to this question, like the video, because Langdon will soon be looking down the barrel of that weapon. The black Skoda Octavia sped along Prague's snowy roads, while Robert Langdon was crammed into the back seat. Captain Janeshek, sitting beside him, was constantly barking orders in Czech over the phone, while looking at Langdon as if he were a criminal. Their destination was the Crucifix Bastion. This was an old defensive fortress, named by Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV because it resembled the hill on which Jesus was crucified. Now, it housed Dr. Gestner's ultra-modern laboratory. Throughout the journey, Janeshek's attitude was clear. In his view, the terrifying woman on Charles Bridge, the bomb threat at the hotel, and Katherine's dream, it was all a cleverly orchestrated theater. For book sales, Janeshek said, gesturing toward his smoking cigarette. There's nothing people won't do for fame and attention, Professor. Janeshek wasn't wrong, was he? We all see what is sacrificed in today's world for the sake of going viral. At Daily Books, we question not only the stories in books, but also the human nature behind those stories. If, like Langdon, you are in pursuit of the truth and want to see beyond popular culture, join us now by liking the video. Because what we are about to see is based on a reality so bloody that no advertising campaign could dare to show it. When the car climbed the tree-lined roads of Fulemanka Park and arrived in front of the castle, it was snowing heavily outside.
The cross of the cross stood dark and silent at the top of the hill, overlooking the city. Modern steel and glass had been clad onto the medieval stone walls. Langdon had a bad feeling when he got out of the car. Dr. Gessner was someone who liked to boast about his laboratory. He should have been there to greet them at the door. The entrance door consisted of a wide, frosted glass panel set in a steel frame. No door handle, only a biometric fingerprint reader and a bell button. Janeshek pressed the bell. He waited. No answer. He turned his head to the security camera above, held his ID card up to the camera's eye, and pressed again. Still no sound inside. Katherine was inside. They were sure of it. So why weren't they opening the door?
Janeshek's patience snapped. He turned around and shouted at the driver, Lieutenant Pavel. Pavel, who until then had seemed like just a driver, suddenly transformed into a trained soldier. He leapt out of the car, drew his weapon, and ran towards the door. Before Langdon could shout, "What are you doing?" Pavel crouched down and pulled the trigger. 6 gunshots shattered the silence. Bang! The bullets pierced the frosted glass, but did not shatter it. The reinforced glass held the bullets like putty. Without wasting a moment, Pavel stood up and delivered a hard kick with his heavy military boot to the center of the circle formed by the bullet holes. At that moment, modern security measures yielded to medieval brute force. The huge glass panel shattered into thousands of small pieces, exploding inwards. The floor was littered with sparkling shards of glass, as if thousands of sugar cubes had been spilled. Langdon froze in the midst of the destruction. There was no turning back now. Janeshek drew his weapon, saying, "After me, Professor," and walked over the shards into the room. Langdon followed. The sound of glass crunching underfoot made the deadly silence inside even more terrifying. The corridor was dark, and while Langdon hoped to find Katherine in that darkness, he was unaware that he was about to encounter an older enemy, the Golem. Doors were broken, boundaries crossed. Science and mysticism now faced each other. Was Katherine alive? What was the Golem's impossible plan? And most importantly, will Langdon make it out of this underground labyrinth alive? The answers to these questions will be revealed in the next video of the series. To make sure you don't miss the story, don't forget to subscribe to the Daily Books channel and turn on notifications. I look forward to your theories in the comments. Who do you think the Golem is? See you in the next episode. Don't stay in the dark.